Well, this is the very definition of racism, is finding one case and saying, actually, this is the class of entire people across people seeking asylum.
And some compassion for the girls that are being sexually assaulted, the man who was killed in Uxbridge.
So I want to stop the small boats. No one wants people risking their lives.
You treat them as asylum
absolutely do. That's an outrageous thing to say. They are asylum seekers.
Why do you stop them? Why do you want to stop them?
Because I want people to be able to get
I thought we're an open and tolerant country.
safe
Why do
and
you want to
managed
stop
routes.
them?
If you want to see how to end any chance of political power in the UK before your career's even started, then check out this debate, because Zack Polanski makes 3 catastrophic mistakes that Laila Cunningham brilliantly exposes. And to be honest, for the sake of the UK and making sure that our nation can build stronger and fairer, is actually for the best. Let's dive in.
You're obviously disagreeing. What would you say to Zack Polanski?
Well, because you can't just have compassion for the illegal immigrants coming on boats and not compassion for the girls that are being sexually assaulted by them and the people that are killed on our streets. We do have men that come on boats and within 8 days sexually assault 14-year-old girls. I find it really galling that the Green Party are so focused on illegal migrants, but they don't have any compassion for our young girls and women who...
I'm not sure that's true.
Well, first of all, an asylum seeker who is coming over here cannot come over here illegally because we need safe and managed routes, and it's very clear across international law that anyone is able to find a safe sanctuary in a country. France is a safe country, but Britain is also a safe country. Germany takes twice as many asylum seekers as Britain. Secondly, sexual assault is a deeply awful and tragic thing that we need to prevent and stop. But there is absolutely no evidence that the people who are sexually assaulting people are people seeking asylum. And
I'm sorry, there is. There's convictions. There is convictions of people who came on boats. They have been convicted. Have you seen the case in Epping? Are you not watching the news? Of course there is evidence.
Well, this is the very definition of racism, is finding one case and saying, actually, this is the class of entire people across people seeking asylum. The people seeking asylum...
Let Laila Cunningham finish.
So we have a Borders Act, and it is actually illegal to come into our country without a passport, without documentation. So the way it happens, they come on a boat, and they are illegal migrants, and they land on our shores, and they say the word asylum. And they are granted all the rights of asylum seekers, yet they're coming from France, and the illegal entry offence is neutralised. We only prosecute 1% of illegal entry into this country. How can we be a democratic, sovereign country when we have decriminalised illegal entry into our country? I want to see some compassion, and some compassion for the girls that are being sexually assaulted, the man who was killed in Uxbridge. And I find it quite shocking that the minister you just had on, all she spoke about was the safety of the people coming on boats. It's obvious that the safety of women and girls in this country is not Labour's priority, because she didn't mention it once.
So what's next? Because he's going to try and paint himself as a pro-border politician, but Laila Cunningham's going to brilliantly expose those lies. Notice the first mistake he just made. He painted everybody who has legitimate concerns about the fact that we don't know who's coming into this country, who's being funded to stay here at taxpayers' expense and wants to have strong borders. He painted everyone who believes that as racist. But the problem for Zack is that is the majority of people in this country. So you have alienated the majority of the people that you claim to want to lead, including any minority that has common sense.
Migrants aren't destroying this country. Bankers are bankrupting this country. Fossil fuel giants, armed trades companies, they're the ones that are destroying this country. And ultimately, if we want to stop the small boats, and I want to stop the small boats, no one wants people risking their lives.
You treat them as asylum
absolutely do. That's an outrageous thing to say. They are asylum seekers.
Why do you stop them? Why do you want to stop them?
Because I want people to be able to get
I thought we're an open and tolerant country.
safe
Why do
and
you want to
managed
stop them?
routes so they can apply for asylum, because most asylum cases are seen to be legitimate, over 80% of cases. I want them to be able to come here to a processing centre in a way that is dignified and treats people with humanity rather than as numbers or pieces of crap, which is the way the Labour government are treating them.
This is the second mistake. If you ask Wayne Broadhurst, Govinda Jahal or Rhiannon White whether their lives were ended by the bankers or by the illegal immigrant that took their lives, then what would they say? Or if you ask the schoolgirl that was raped nearby a shopping centre in Oxford by an Iranian man staying in one of these asylum hotels, whether it's the bankers or an illegal migrant that's destroyed her life, what would she say? But these leftists cannot see anything other than the money. And this is exactly what the British people are seeing through and rejecting. Now watch Laila Cunningham talk about the biggest scandal that angers most Brits, the Pakistani grooming gangs, and notice how Zack Polanski does not even want to touch it.
So even though Nigel Farage posted on X today that the Home Secretary sounded like a reform supporter, you don't think Reform MPs will vote
I think
for
it's in the right direction, but I think it's virtue signalling. For instance, the three countries that she's going to prevent visas if they don't accept returns, we've only had a handful of people arrive on illegal boats. Why is she not including Pakistan in that? I'd like to see returns agreement for the Pakistani rape gangs, but of course that's her political base. Would she dare disturb it? We have rapists walking the streets, convicted rapists, and we have a community that protected them, and Pakistan doesn't want to take them back. I'd like to see visa restrictions on that, but I'm not seeing that. In fact, I'm seeing that she's opening legal routes that will be community driven. Who will vet those communities? Who will prevent certain communities, certain religions from overtaking that community sponsorship, and we getting a higher proportion of, let's say, the Pakistani community that protected the rape gangs? How do we know more are not going to come in?
Everything she said is true. But again, look at where Zack Polanski wants to shift the focus.
There probably is a point of agreement here, which is for taxpayers, the hotels are completely inappropriate, as are the barracks. Ultimately, these are huge lucrative contracts between government ministers and some of these companies, whereas actually we should be putting people into housing and treating people with dignity. Because actually,
housing that should go to British people.
If we allow people to work, we know that migration is of economic benefit. We prioritise British people. There's 150,000 vacancies in the National Health Service. We have vacancies in the construction industry.
I'm talking about for housing.
And we have an ageing population. Who is going to pay people pensions?
We have hundreds of thousands on the waiting list for social housing.
So let's build some social housing. It's all a distraction from inequality.
It's not a distraction.
It's all a distraction from reform and their billionaire mates who want to divide this country rather than allow people to treat each other with dignity.
Now, we could talk about how the Green Party want to ban landlords whilst legalising drugs. We could talk about how they think taxing the wealthy will solve all the world's problems, even though we all know how much governments waste money. We could talk about these things, but ultimately the main reason why the British public will reject people like Zack Polanski is because you cannot trust them to keep you safe. Just think about it. According to the Home Office, 65% of people from 2018 that came to the UK through small boats have been granted refugee status. That means almost 2/3 of people who have broken into the UK illegally have been rewarded with the right to stay in the UK. That 65% of people, according to people like Zack Polanski, do you think they're going to bring that down? Or do you think they're going to increase the number of people who would be allowed to stay? And don't forget, the kinds of people who come and claim asylum include people like Abdul Azidi, who committed the heinous chemical attack several years ago and was allowed to stay in the UK just because he claimed to become a Christian. Because, of course, we all know the most Christian thing you can do is to throw acid over a woman's face. The asylum seekers also include 3 men who were recently charged for this heinous act in Brighton. It also includes this asylum seeker who committed this heinous act against a 15-year-old girl in Oxford. So, according to Zack Polanski, based on what you've heard, do you trust him to clamp down on the routes that allow people like this to come into the UK and be housed at taxpayer expense? Do you trust him to see Britain as a nation worth preserving, with culture that is worth preserving? Do you trust him to see that there's actually more to what makes this country great than just the tolerance, which is basically saying there's nothing unique about Britain except the fact that we take other people's cultures, not seeing anything about the UK as distinct, as virtuous, as incredible, as beautiful to preserve? Do you trust him to ensure the safety of you and your children? That is why all of these far leftists that want to make all of our nation's problems purely economical will continue to fail. Because the British public will continue to see that, yes, even though we need to have discussions about our economics, of course, people are angry about what we saw in the recent budget, Rachel Reeves claiming that there's this massive public black hole in order for her to justify her tax rises, when it then turns out that she has probably misled the cabinet about the state of our finances and that there was actually no need to tax us to high heavens anyway. Of course, we need to be talking about economics, we need to be talking about growth and all of these things, but none of these things really matter if you cannot control who is in and who is out and make sure that there is a fair system where the people of this nation are prioritized above the people who would break our laws and try to erase our culture. In Luke chapter 19, Jesus drove out the Pharisees and the scribes out of the temple with whips. Yeah, Jesus had strength. He had muscle, right? And he did that because they were exploiting the poor, selling animals as sacrifices for their sins, as if the temple is meant to be a place of profit. So Jesus had compassion for the people by demonstrating and exercising strength against those that would exploit them. So sometimes having compassion, in fact, always having compassion for people, includes having the strength to be able to defend them from those who would abuse the system.